Good morning, everybody. We're live here from the birdhouse, and today we're giving an update on some of the birds people have been spotting in our area, the upstate New York area. As always, if you have any kind of sightings, we love to know what those are. You can put those in the comments. If you have any questions, throw those in there too, or you can just say hi. We always love to know who is on and watching. But let's get started. You guys have sent in some pretty neat photos, and there's been some fun bird activity happening. First, there's been some warblers still being seen around, and if you're further south than New York, you might be seeing even more so than we are. Here's a photo sent in by Bob of a yellow-rumped warbler that he had recently in his yard. He says, wasn't expecting to see a yellow-rumped warbler hanging around the yard in the past few days, especially on the ground a few times. So it just goes to show you never quite know what you might see as you go out in the yard looking. You might even start to see some warblers in your backyard, especially things like the yellow-rumped warbler. And you can kind of see it here. It's a little small. It's in the center of the photo here. Another photo here sent in by Bob, who said, some recent photos. Sorry that the golden crown kinglets and yellow rump / Nashville warblers photos are so far away. Those kinglets are so tiny and zippy. So there's a picture here in the center of the screen of a Nashville warbler that he also saw in his backyard. So again, you never know what you might see. You might still see some warbler activity. So keep an eye out on those shrubs. And golden crown kinglets and ruby crown kinglets, people are definitely seeing. So if you're seeing something small bouncing around in the tree, could be a warbler, could be a golden crowned or ruby crown kinglet. Here's a picture of a golden crown kinglet. And then here is the ruby crown kinglet, and you don't always see that little ruby patch on the top of their head. You usually don't see that. But these are two different species that we have around here right now. And then here's another photo sent in by Bob of the golden crown kinglet. Again, kind of small there in the center of the photo, sitting on a branch. And if you look really, really close, depending on the size of your screen, you might be able to see that little stripe of its golden crown. So they are definitely around. Same as different sparrows. So people are starting to report some more diversity of sparrows in their yard in some bigger numbers, like this white-throated sparrow. So keep an eye out underneath your feeders usually. Sometimes people will get them on their hopper feeders or on their tray feeders, anything with a large enough perch for this bird to fit on. You might just get a white-throated sparrow, but they're most likely going to be underneath your feeder. So keep an eye out for these. This is another photo sent in by Bob. There's also white-crowned sparrow to keep an eye out for. Look pretty similar, but they don't have that yellow or that white patch under their throat. And the white-throated sparrow has a lot of yellow on its head right in between its bill and its eye. So that's going to be the difference between the two. So there's the white-throated sparrow and the white-crowned sparrow, both of which are being seen. And then here's a song sparrow as well, which was sent in by Bob. It has lots of stripes on it, and those stripes tend to kind of all come down to a point where there is a little black dot there on its breast that you can see. So that is the song sparrow. And you might start to see tree sparrows as well. They're going to be a bird that is more common here. Again, underneath your feeders, you can find them. They've got that chestnut colored cap. They've got a little dot there, like a little polka dot on their breast. So this is the American tree sparrow. They also have a bill it's called having a bicolored bill. The top is black and the bottom is yellow. So you might see those. You might see fox sparrow, which is a large kind of chubby sparrow underneath your feeders, or if you've got bushes and shrubs in your yard, they kind of flick the leaf litter around underneath looking for some food. So if you hear something flicking around there, check it out because it could very well be a fox sparrow. And towhees. There's still been some towhees around, more common in the spring months, but you just might see them in the wintertime too. And a lot of people have been reporting tufted titmouse too. A tufted titmouse in more numbers than usual, I would say. Usually people will report one or two, but people are reporting large groups of tufted titmouse coming to their feeders. So especially if you have black oil sunflower seed, if you have any kind of peanuts like peanut pickouts, the tufted titmouse absolutely love that. And the goldfinches, of course, Their bright gold plumage is gone for the rest of the year, but they are around coming to Niger feeders. They'll eat sunflower seed as well, so we'll have them here all winter long. Same with the red-breasted nuthatches. A lot of people reporting those also coming to their feeders. Again, a bird that tends to be more common in the wintertime. Dark-eyed juncos are back. Curious if you guys have seen dark-eyed juncos at your feeders yet this year. As the temperatures get cooler and cooler, there'll be more and more reports of them. They're going to be here for the winter months, and then in general, they will migrate further north in the spring and summer, but we do have some that nest here. And pine siskin, another thing to keep an eye out at your bird feeders, especially your Niger feeders. If you see something that looks like a stripy kind of goldfinch, could very well be a pine siskin. Some other things to look out for on your trees are going to be brown creeper. Here was a photo sent in recently by Bob of a brown creeper. They definitely blend in really, really well. So they can be hard to see on your trees. They will climb up a tree. So if you see something small and brown that's kind of creeping, if you will, up your tree, it's probably going to be a brown creeper. So they're kind of small, they're brown in color, and then they've got what's called a decurved bill. Their bill curves downward, and they're scouring the trunks of trees for different eggs or insects or pupas, and they are around now as well. Hawks, as it gets cooler, you'll probably get some kind of hawk activity in your yard if you're feeding the birds. And there are two hawks especially that are most commonly seen in the winter in people's yards. The first being the Cooper's hawk, and then there's the sharp-shinned hawk. And the Cooper's hawk is a larger, bulkier bird. The sharp-shinned hawk is quite small. They can be about the size of a blue jay, so they can be really, really small. So if you see a strikingly small hawk in your yard, it is probably going to be a sharp-shinned hawk. And then there's also Cooper's hawks as well, and they go after birds in people's yards, especially in the winter months. And here's a photo sent in by Bob of one of those hawks. Now, this is in its juvenile plumage. So the adult plumage is more kind of a grayish color with, an orangish colored breast. But the juvenile plumage for both the sharp-shinned hawk and the Cooper's hawk is this brownish color with speckling and with a stripe, some stripes on the tail. It's hard to tell size-wise what kind of hawk this is. I'm not totally sure if it's the Cooper's or if it's the sharp-shinned. Normally the Cooper's is the most common of the two. Here's a better photo there, actually. And because it has kind of a more rounded tail, which tends to be a characteristic of the Cooper's hawk, I'm going to guess that's what it is. If Bob happens to be on, he might be able to give a better idea of what this bird of prey was. But don't be surprised if you see some hawks in your yard. But that's a sign of a healthy ecosystem, so it's not something to be discouraged about, even though it can be upsetting if they happen to snatch one of the birds at your feeders. And then there's butterflies. I've been seeing a lot of these yellow butterflies out this past weekend. They were all over the place. And some kind of a sulfur butterfly here, bright yellow with black around the edges of its wings. I saw a whole bunch out this weekend myself as well. So still some butterfly activity out there. And then ducks, lots of waterfowl and different birds by the water. If you happen to get out by the water, you should get to see a really good diversity of things. Here is a male wood duck here, and this was sent in by Mark, who saw this at the Erie Canal Widewater location. And then here's another one as well. And he says, saw 6 wood ducks at the canal. Wood ducks have a couple of broods each year, as a question. And here's the male and female here. And I looked it up because I wasn't totally sure. My Birds of New York book. So wood ducks are cavity nesters. So they'll nest in empty trees. They will nest in birdhouses if you have one big enough that's in the right kind of habitat. But it looks like they only have one brood a year. So I wonder if it was a family group, or it could have been a group just kind of all grouping up to migrate down south. Bald eagles will have bald eagles around all winter long as they can find some unfrozen bodies of water to fish. One place locally that's super popular to see them is out in Syracuse by the mall out there. There's a water treatment plant that keeps the water just warm enough so it doesn't freeze over, and the bald eagles group up there in huge numbers. So that's a place you can go all winter long to see them. This was another photo sent in by Mark, this time of the Irondequoit Bay, and he says bald eagle eyeing its catch and a turkey vulture nearby. So still some turkey vultures around. They tend to be going south for the winter as well, but I've still seen a few around also, kind of, especially last week when the weather was really nice. And actually it's going to be nice again today, so you might see some gliding around with the weather being kind of warm today. Some pictures of Montezuma that were sent in by Mark. Montezuma is a really good place to go birding. Right now, you'll see there's not only eagles and different birds of prey, but the waterfowl migration is going through. So you'll see some different ducks and geese, and I'll show you some of those as well. But here's a picture of a bald eagle. So he sent in a couple of those, including this pair here sitting on the tree. And then here is a northern harrier, again, taken at Montezuma. Now, northern harrier, they're around here in the winter months as well. They're sometimes called a marsh hawk, or known as a marsh hawk, because they do glide over marshes as they hunt for prey. And you can also find them hunting over fields as well. If you ever go to look for short-eared owls anywhere, you kind of know they like that open habitat of wide open fields, and northern harriers will go into that same type of habitat during the daylight hours. There are differences in color with northern harriers. This is a female here. The males are gray, but they both will have what's called a white rump patch, and you can kind of see it here in this photo, this bright white patch there on the bird. Both male and female northern harriers will have that. That's a very distinguishing characteristic of them. Also, their behavior tends to let you identify them also pretty easily, because they tend to glide low over fields and over marshes. You're not going to really see them flying high up in the air like you would a red-tailed hawk or a bald eagle or turkey vulture or anything like that. They're going to be flying low over fields and marshes. Another thing I've noticed, and here's a photo that Mark sent in that said red-winged blackbirds migrating through. I've noticed over the past couple of weeks or so, huge flocks of blackbirds that are migrating through, and you can get mixed flocks of them. In fact, this almost looks like, to me, not only some red-winged blackbirds, but there might be a rusty blackbird here in the corner perched there. We do have what are called rusty blackbirds. Those are being seen right now in mixed flocks with other blackbirds migrating through. Behind the store here, we've just had the trees covered with grackles and red-winged blackbirds, and they're just squawking and squawking and squawking, eating from the feeders and then just moving on. Huge groups of mixed flocks of blackbirds. And with those mixed flocks, you might have these rusty blackbirds, so keep an eye out for them. They've got that kind of light colored eye. Grackles, of course, common grackles, and red-winged blackbirds. And red-winged blackbirds, they can look different from what they would normally look like in the spring when they're not in their breeding plumage. So you might see something that looks like this here that has just a little reddish or yellowish patch on its wing, and that is going to be a red-winged blackbird. So they can look quite a bit different right now compared to how they would normally look coming to your feeders in the spring and summer months. Some shorebirds out there as well. Here's a photo of a greater yellow legs sent over by Mark, who found these guys over in Irondequoit Bay. And then a merlin. Talk about another type of bird of prey. Here's a little falcon called a merlin, which you'd be more likely to see here than a kestrel this time of the year. The kestrels kind of making their way down south, but there are some merlin that'll stay here throughout the winter months. So if you see a little falcon this time of the year, it's probably going to be a merlin, though I wouldn't be totally surprised if there's still some stragglers as far as kestrels go, but definitely be on the lookout for these little merlin. And if you make your way out to any kind of body of water, especially Montezuma, There are sandhill cranes that are still being seen there. They're migrating through, going south for the winter. So keep an eye out for them. And then other small ducks and waterfowl you can find this time of the year still, like this pied-billed grebe. So this is a smaller diving type of duck. You might see them floating around, then all of a sudden they disappear under the water as they go hunting for some different fish or macroinvertebrates. American coot, also being seen in the Montezuma area. And then some different ducks like northern shoveler. They've got that really wide bill. Birds like green-winged teal and northern pintail and American widgeon are all being spotted with some pretty good regularity out there at Montezuma. So that is everything I have for you guys today. We will be back on Saturday with another broadcast. If you have any questions or comments, you can put those in the chat here in the little comment box. Should also mention that on Saturday here at the store, so Saturday, which is the 29th, we will be having a jigsaw puzzle exchange, which we've been doing once a month, and they have been getting quite popular. So any time between 10 a.m. and noon, you can come in and drop off your jigsaw puzzles and pick up some new ones. Absolutely free. It's just a swap out program because what do you do with them once you've completed them once? So we have that going on this Saturday, the 29th, from 10 till noon here at the Birdhouse. So let's see. Randy's on. He says, good morning, Liz and every birdie. He also says, haven't seen a robin for a month now, but the chickadees can be heard. Yes, I've been hearing lots of chickadees. Been hearing the nuthatches make those little kind of nasally squawking sounds. And I've got a Carolina wren that's been singing its heart out every morning. But yeah, I haven't seen many robins myself either, and they are migratory. So for the most part, they'll go a little bit further south where the weather's slightly warmer. But we might see some throughout the winter. There are some that will spend the winter here. And actually, Bob popped on and says tons of robins. So Bob is seeing a lot of robins. So it just depends on where you are. It looks like in the Rochester area. Let's see. You are enough says I have these visit my yard a few times a week. I had a sparrowhawk lately, and it's all because I feed the birds. So I think they're talking about the birds of prey there that visit bird feeders, and they have been having them visit the yard a few times a week. So birds of prey are being sighted in people's backyards. Randy says, watched a hawk come close to taking a pigeon. Pigeon got away and nearly flew into a neighbor. When I heard a murder of crows, I usually notice they are chasing a hawk. It's very true. If you hear a whole bunch of commotion, whether it be crows, blue jays are another one, they're quite vocal. Even chickadees and nuthatches, if there's a bird of prey around, they'll form a little group and start squawking and making a commotion. It's usually a sign that there's a hawk or some other bird of prey, even an owl, close by. So that's a good way to see if you've got some kind of a bird of prey in the area. If the birds start going nuts and making all kinds of noise, check out what they're going after, because you'll probably see some kind of bird of prey. And Catherine says, I have red-winged blackbirds at my Penfield feeder. So she is still getting red-winged blackbirds coming through her feeders as well. So definitely lots of blackbird activity happening, but be on the lookout for those rusty blackbirds, because it's not something you're going to typically see in your backyard, but you never know. You could take a close look when you see that mixed flock, because you might just have some rusty blackbirds there in your mixed flock. So that is everything I have for you guys today. We'll be back on Saturday with another broadcast. And until then, enjoy your birds and have a great week. Take care.